The Nigerian Senate just this week reconvened briefly and approved a loan request of 850 billion naira requested by President Muhammadu Buhari just about the time the International Monetary Fund, IMF, also approved a $3.4 billion in relief aid to Nigeria to combat COVID-19. For a chat on these and other issues, we're now being joined by Mustapha Chike-Obi, a former managing director, CEO of Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. Welcome to the program. Mustapha Chike-Obi, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to the program.
Thanks again.
Hello?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Hello, good morning. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Can you hear him?
Unfortunately, we seem to be having a technical glitch in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Chike-Obi. Can you hear us?
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, brilliant.
Very
we can
good.
hear you now.
Can hear
good
you
morning.
now.
Thanks
but
for
before we
us.
go to the issue of IMF and the 850 billion that has now been approved, that's the external borrowing plan, now redirected to the domestic market. Let's start with a test press statement that was issued yesterday by the Central Bank of Nigeria, announcing the reopening of forex sales to bureau de change and also for certain invisibles, like the payment of school fees and all of that. Is that a welcome development? And what else do you think that the CBN should be looking at in the context of trying to create or respond to a new normal that is emerging on account of COVID-19 and economic shocks?
Well, Ruben and Leila, if you can pardon me, let me take a step back. I think that the impact of COVID-19 on Nigeria, and I'm focusing on Nigeria in particular, is going to be in two dimensions. One dimension is the health dimension, and you've had doctors talk about it. And the second dimension is the economic dimension. So I think we need to step back and look at, I think that in the long run, if these two things are not handled properly, that the economic problems might lead to more problems down the road in terms of livelihood, security, health, and happiness. So I think that these two areas, the health area, which is being handled by the doctors and the scientists, and the economic area should be both handled very delicately. So taking a step back, instead of dealing with specific things that CBN has or hasn't done, I think we need to take a holistic look at what the economy is today, what it should look like, and things we should be doing to make sure that we come out of the economic side in a manner that Nigerians have a healthy and happy life. Life must go on. So depends on the magnitude of what CBN has done with the SMEs and the bureau de change. It's okay. That doesn't address the larger issues that we have to face going forward. And I think it's those larger issues that I think we should be discussing, if you don't mind.
Certainly, there are larger issues that we are definitely going to face from the coronavirus pandemic. And we're here to talk about the $3.4 billion loan rapid financing instrument, actually, that was approved by the IMF for Nigeria, the largest that we've heard of. Now, this is supposed to be a funding without strings sort of program that was created by the IMF to broaden their sort of reform. But, I mean, it has to be repaid within 5 years as well. But do you think there are any risks that come with an RFI that we can identify and we should be aware of?
First of all, we need to compliment the Minister of Finance and her team for arranging this, what I call a lifeline. You are quite correct, it's a loan, and it's supposed to be repaid between 3¼ and 5 years. That's the range of time for repayment. And while it doesn't come with strings, what they call conditionalities, it does come with strong suggestions as to what should be done with the money and how the money should be spent. And 3.4 billion sounds like a large amount of money, but it's roughly 1% to 2% of our GDP. It's just a lifeline. It's not enough to solve our economic problems. And so, depending on how we use the money and how we are transparent and forward-looking, we're going to need much more money. I think we're going to need upwards of 20 billion from various world agencies. And they're watching what we do with this 3.4 billion. And I think that this 3.4 billion, if it's spent properly, I suspect that we'll be able to we'll more try to get more money down the road. But it's 1% of GDP, and it's not enough to solve all our problems. But it's a welcome lifeline, and the minister should be commended for being able to get this lifeline at this time.
Well, the Senate also a few days ago reconvened and approved $850 billion local loan request by the president of Nigeria. How significant is that? And we're being told that this is not a new loan, that it was originally part of the 2020 budget. It's only the sourcing of it that has been changed.
Yes, I've always been against foreign borrowing in dollars. Because like everybody knows, every 5 years or so, FX devalues by about 30 to 50%. And borrowing in foreign currency ends up being more expensive than borrowing domestically. So if this was a loan that was approved previously, and now they're changing it from dollars to naira, then I think it's a very smart thing to do, and I welcome it. Even if it's an additional loan, I still think that this is the time that the Nigerian government should be borrowing money. I think the purpose is what matters. What you do with the money is what matters. And there are some things we should not do with the $850 billion, and some things, and even with the $3.4 billion. We should not, one, use it to support our foreign exchange. That's not the purpose. We should not be using this money to support our foreign exchange rate. Let the foreign exchange rate go to a level that's sustainable on its own. We should not be sharing this money with the states. This is a federal government loan that has to be repaid within 3 to 5 years, roughly. And it must be used for specific things that will, A, solve our immediate problem and then build for the future. And the third thing it should not be used for is for subsidies. So as long as it's not being used for those three things, I think that we'll do well with borrowing more money and using it for the proper things.
Speaking of borrowing more money, Mr. Chike-Obi, let me go back to the point I was making before, because you said it doesn't come with strings, it comes with suggestions. This is now, again, with regards to the IMF loan that we've received, and it's just about 1 to 2% roughly of our GDP. And you said that we need about $20 billion upwards to really, from various agencies, for us to really overcome what we're going through. Do you think we're going to have to go back to the IMF for a proper loan? A lot of analysts are saying that, a proper conditional loan. What is your reaction to that?
Yes, I think that we're going to have to go back to the IMF for a proper loan. I think we're going to go to the World Bank for loans. I think there are other agencies in the world that are set up. Even under the IMF guidelines, if your GDP is affected by 20% or more, there's a new facility that you can access. So we will need upwards of $20 billion, and I think that this is a test case. If the government manages this money very responsibly, very transparently, I think that it opens up the door for more money down the road. But if we use this money the way we used money in the past, in an opaque, non-clear fashion, so that at the end of 3 or 6 months, we don't know what happened to the money, I think that we'll find it very difficult to source the rest of the money we need in the future.
Well, I mean, the IMF, after that, approval by its board, also made certain additional statements, some of which you have referred to. They're saying that Nigeria will still need to take certain steps, medium-term macroeconomic stability, revenue-based consolidation, priority spending being properly defined, a unified foreign exchange regime, and quite a number of issues. What, in specific terms, do you think should be our priorities?
There are 4 things we should do with the money, in my opinion. First of all, health. We need to start building our health infrastructure. This is a good opportunity to do so. Too many Nigerians die from all sorts of diseases, malaria being number 1, Lassa fever, all sorts of things. I think that this is the time for us to now start building our health infrastructure so that there are a lot of children that grow up today with malnutrition, and it affects their development down the road, their cognitive development down the road. So I think that this is a good chance to focus on our health infrastructure. The second thing is education, and I mean we have to start looking at digital learning. We have to start building infrastructure for people to learn remotely and from home. I think this is a chance for us to look into health and education. We also need to look at security. And finally, we need to look for support for industries that are critical, manufacturing industries, power. This is the time for us to start focusing on things that can give us productivity down the road, because this shock will happen again. And this is a chance for us to start being prepared for the long term. So those investments is what we should be making. And I'm not a big fan of school fees abroad. So the CBN opening up the window for school fees abroad doesn't strike me as a priority at this time. But in their wisdom, that's what they've chosen to do. But I think we should start investing for the future, and we should start now.
Mr. Chike-Obi, thank you very much. Do hold your thoughts. We're going to go on a very quick commercial break, and when we are back, the conversation continues. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Mr. Mustapha Chike-Obi, a former MD and CEO of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, is still here with us on the morning show, looking into a number of matters around COVID-19. Thank you for staying with us, Mr. Chike-Obi. Before we went on a break, you had just concluded on what you were saying, and I'd also like us to take a look at the financial system and the banks in particular, because it's said that indigenous oil companies have lost about $12 billion so far to the volatility of the market. So my question is, to what extent are local banks exposed to these companies, and what does this mean for the financial system in Nigeria going forward?
Well, I think the banks are exposed to a lot more than the indigenous oil companies. I think that we should look at the loans that the banks have to the state government. I think that's a significant number, and I find that with this new oil price, apart from this extraordinary fact sharing of last month, I think FAC is probably going to drop to the 400 billion range, which will put a lot of states in monetary pressure. So I believe that the loans outstanding to the state should be looked at. I think a lot of other industries are having very difficult times. So I think banks need to be watched very carefully. I think that this is not a time for overregulation by CBN. I read that they had tried to sterilize some money last weekend from the banks. 1-point-something trillion was taken from the banks. I think this is not the time to overregulate. I think this is time for the CBN to work with the banks and find a path so that the banks can banks will always, if they can get through, all banks need is time. If you give banks time, they will make money in the long run. So we need to find a way for CBN and the banks to work together. Look at all these loans, restructure them in a sustainable way so that the banks survive and the financial system doesn't collapse. But there's a real risk of financial system collapsing if care is not taken at this point.
Well, a few days ago, the chairman of the FIRS, the Internal Revenue Service, Federal Internal Revenue Service, issued a statement, what he called an update on palliative measures, advising corporate bodies to see how they can pay their taxes earlier than as due to help Nigeria address its revenue squeeze. And you had, on your Twitter handle, I'd asked the question whether or not the chairman of FRS has not heard about tax anticipation bonds, which you obviously thought would have been the best approach. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, when a government or a municipality or even a state is fairly certain and can demonstrate they're expecting some tax revenues, because tax revenues come at a certain time based on audited financials, based on any number of things. And corporations cannot just pay taxes willy-nilly without knowing what their financials are at the end of the year. So what people do all over the world is for them to anticipate those revenues, issue bonds if they have immediate cash needs, and using those bonds, the bonds are repaid when the taxes come by. Obviously, your ability to anticipate your taxes and your honesty about it matters. But if the chairman of the FRS believes that he's going to have additional tax revenues at the end of the year, the best thing for him to do is to issue a one-year tax anticipation bond. It should be subscribed to by the pension funds, I'm sure. And then when the taxes come, pay off the bond, instead of asking companies to do something that they're not equipped to do. It was ill-advised. It was an ill-advised statement, and I think we should just forgive him for it. He's been taken to the coals over it for a while now. So I think we should I think he will learn from that, I hope.
Certainly an ill-advised statement is a good way to put it. Now, of course, one thing that we do know that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought globally is the fact that we all have to adopt some sort of a new normal. We all have to adjust to a new way of life, and we're already doing it. Mr. Chike-Obi, if you were in government, what would a post-COVID-19 Nigeria look like to you? Quite broad a question, I know.
Broad and tough. I think that before COVID-19, Nigeria had been doing many things wrong. I think our governance has been wrong. I think that there is no reason on earth for any governor in Nigeria who depends on us for their living to be going around in 10, 20 car convoys and all the extravagance that we see associated with governance. I think this is a time for us to take a huge cut at the cost of government. The president of Nigeria, when he's traveling, if you're in Abuja, there's policemen lining the streets for 4 hours before he even leaves the villa, and the Inspector General of Police goes with him, and the ministers go with him to the airport, and all of that should stop. We should have a very lean government. If the president is going to the airport, he should go with 5 cars and get on the plane and go to where he's going to. And if he does that, the governors will follow suit. But this waste in government, this governors having 200 essays, all of that has to stop. We need to take a serious look at the cost of governance in Nigeria, and we must all make sacrifices from the top to the bottom, because we are in for 2 or 3 years, as they say in the Bible. I think the Bible was 7 years, but we have 2 or 3 years of very, very tough economic conditions. The oil markets will not improve significantly in the next year or two. Nigeria will have to go through very lean times, and all of us have to sacrifice and face the fact that we must sacrifice to build a new, stronger Nigeria. And we can, and we have the potential to do so.
Well, I'd like to take you back to the issue of banks and debts. I mean, you were the CEO of AMCON, the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, which was to set up to help resolve issues of owed debts by banks. And the original plan was that by now it will have been wound down. But why do you think AMCON is still in existence?
Well, there's 2 reasons. The most technical reason is that when we were modeling AMCON, AMCON did not have an end date, but we had an operational end date. We had planned for 10 years. And the plan was based on the fact that the banks who are going to end up paying the bulk of AMCON's liabilities will be growing at a rate of 10 to 15% a year in growth. What happened was that the CBN took a very, very hard stance and a very restrictive monetary stance from, I would say, 2012 onwards. And banks started growing at less than the 10, 15% were planned to under 5%. And because of that low growth in bank assets, the money they were supposed to pay to AMCON has actually been extended by another 5 years. So there is a plan that will have AMCON totally liquidated within the next 5 years. And I think that that plan at some point in the future will be taken up by the CBN. And so AMCON has just extended its life by 5 years because of the slow growth of banks. But the plan at the time was very sound, and I think the plan remains very sound. I do think that now the situation, if not properly managed, could be worse than the situation that brought AMCON in the first place. So the monetary authorities and the fiscal authorities have to be very careful to handle the banking situation very carefully.
Mr. Chike-Obi, thank you for that. And in a second, we're going to go back to discuss the financial system a bit more. But as you're aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has also come with a tectonic shift in businesses that are willing to do business with China. The U.S. is encouraging its businesses to pull out of China. Japan has even put forward I believe it's a $1 billion or $1 trillion package to assist companies in leaving China. Now, some analysts are saying that this presents a unique opportunity for Africa to attract some of these businesses and bring them into Africa. But some analysts are also saying that we need to perfect the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement before that can happen. What is your take?
My take is there's a lot of emotion floating around the world right now. There's anti-China emotions, there's anti-American emotions, there's a neglect of Africa by the West at this point. I think that we should all calm down, and 3 months from now, I think things will be much clearer. I wouldn't start making long-term manufacturing plans based on China being out of business at this point. I think there's a lot of emotion in the air. I think Donald Trump is whipping up emotions for his own political purposes at this point. So I think that if I were a policymaker, I'll just sit and wait for the dust to settle, because those are long-term plans, and I wouldn't want to make a long-term plan when there's emotions flying around.
Well, when you were talking about the banks earlier on, you alluded to the fact of their exposure to the state governments. And if you see the crisis in the oil and gas industry, do you foresee a financial crisis of the type that we have in 2008 and 2009? And do you see, a second AMCON after COVID-19 having to bail out the banks or go after debts? What do you foresee with regard to AMCON post-COVID-19?
I think that the situation is potentially larger and more dangerous than 2008, 2009, if not properly managed. So there's something going for us. We have experience, and we know how to, even without AMCON, manage banks. So I think that it has to take some management. Without that management, there could be a big disaster. In terms of a new AMCON, there is neither the political will nor the executive will to have another AMCON. AMCON has attracted lots of emotion, right or wrong. And I don't think that the banks will sign up for another AMCON because the banks are going to pay the bulk of AMCON's liability at the end of the day. So I don't think that another AMCON is feasible. So the best way to go is prevention. We need to sit down, put all our best minds together, deal honestly with the situation, and find a way to avert the catastrophe. But if we let it happen, it's probably 2 or 3 times larger than than 2008, 2009 problem.
Okay, quickly, I mean, we have just a few minutes left. I would like to have your thoughts on the plan to ease restrictions in Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT by May 4, and also perhaps in some other parts of the country. I asked you this question because the last time you were on this program and we discussed COVID-19.
I've been expecting this.
Yes. So here it is. You had said there was no cause for panic.
Yes.
But now with development since then, do you think that we should panic? And do you think that it's a wise decision to relax the restrictions?
You see, I'm a numbers person. I'm not a medical person. So what I would tell you is this. It is clear to me from the numbers that the COVID-19 virus, is not very potent in Nigeria. I don't know why. There could be a number of reasons. People have advanced reasons like heat and all that. The reason I say that is that we have 1,700 cases in a country of 200 million people after 2 months. There are more than 1,700 people in the last 2 months that have fallen down the steps and broken their legs. In any country of 200 million people, 1,700 is a non-event. So for some reason, now people say, well, it's because we're not testing and we don't know. But if we're not testing, then there should be more infections and there should be more deaths and more cases that actually go to the hospital because it's not something you hide. So the fact of the matter is that it's not a very potent thing. We need to be careful. We need to observe everything that we can. But I don't think it's a very potent thing. And the scientists will tell us 3 years from now why it wasn't very potent in Nigeria. It wasn't because we were very smart. It wasn't because the lockdown wasn't effective in Lagos. People were going around. People live in multiple dwellings in parts of Lagos. And yet, we're not seeing a lot of people dying. So there's something, maybe it's providence, maybe it's God, that has made it not very potent here. And I maintain my position that 6 months from now, what we will be worrying about will be the economic effect of COVID, much more than we'll be worried about the health effect of COVID. So yes, I support easing of restrictions, and I think that we should be careful, but we should not overreact to COVID in Nigeria.
But do you not think that the WHO's advice on testing is advice that we should certainly take? Because the more we ramp up our testing capacity in Nigeria, Mr. Chike-Obi, the more cases of COVID-19 that we are seeing. One excuse that analysts, or one reason rather that analysts are giving for the low numbers that we're seeing across Africa is because Africa has more mild to moderate cases apparently, which may even stretch the virus on for longer because we'll have more asymptomatic people. How do you react to this?
My reaction is the same. We are not seeing many people dead. We're not seeing many people in hospitals. COVID is not something that you can hide. So if there were a lot of people being infected, we will see it after a while in the hospitals and in the death. So the fact that the hospitals are not overcrowded, we have isolation centers in Lagos that are not full. The fact that people are not...
Mr. Chike-Obi,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. If you could hold your thoughts for just a moment, we'll go on a very quick commercial break, and when we are back, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the morning show here on Arise News, and Mr. Mustapha Chike-Obi is still in the Arise studio with us, looking into a number of issues surrounding COVID-19 in Nigeria. Thank you for staying on the program with us, Mr. Chike-Obi. Before we went on a break, you had maintained your position with regards to the fact that if there were more COVID-19 cases, we would definitely be seeing more COVID-19. So to follow up on that, how do you explain, or how do you react rather, to what's going on in Kano State, where the president has had to put a lockdown on the states because of the number of mysterious deaths that the state has seen over the past 2 weeks, with symptoms that are linked to COVID-19 symptoms as well?
Well, let me just say I'm not being dogmatic about this. If the numbers change, I will change my view. I'm just a numbers person. If you add Kano, you're talking 600 deaths in Nigeria. 600 plus the 50 that's already been stated. That's 650 in a country of 250 million people. More people die from malaria than that. You see, people are going to say to you that, oh, there's no cure for COVID, so it scares us. But I'd rather take a virus that kills 600 people in 6 months with no cure than take malaria that kills 600,000 people in a year with a so-called cure. 600,000 people dead is much worse than 600, whether one has a cure, one doesn't have a cure. So I'm looking at the numbers. It's not a very potent killer in Nigeria so far. If it becomes so, and I pray it doesn't, I will change my view. But right now, we are not shutting down our country for malaria. We're not shutting down our country for typhoid. We're not shutting down our country for snake bites. Snake bites kill much more than 600 people a year in Nigeria. So let's be careful. Let's observe all the protocols that we need to observe. But let's not kill our economy. Let's not starve our people. Let's not create security problems for our people because of something that has so far not proven to be a very potent killer.
Well, one of the points that have been made by, commentators is that our world is never going to be the same again after COVID-19. People have been talking about the new normal.
Yes.
And I guess there can be two sides to it, the positive side and the negative side. Now, on both sides, what do you foresee would happen in the long run or in the short term, considering the fact that many companies are beginning to lay off staff? Many companies are no longer paying salaries. Arik Air announced the other day that by end of May, 90% of its workforce will have to go on leave without pay. British Airways wants to lay off 12,000 workers out of its 42,000 workforce. Now, that may be on the negative side, but do you see some positive developments also?
Well, look, this is a blow to the world. This is going to cause a lot of pain and hardship. And I think in the short run, next 6 months to a year, we're going to all have to pay the price for what this has done. There's no way of sugarcoating it. There's no positives to this in the short run. In the long run, there may be positives. We've now learned that we can actually school people. People can school at home. People can work at home. We can develop a whole more efficient way of working and schooling. But that's down the road. This is a blow, and we must all be ready to absorb the blow. But we saw this. After 9/11, people said air travel is done. We had to go through this new protocol of all these airport searches and all the security things at airports. But within 10 years, air travel had doubled. We will get out of this. Human beings have a wonderful way of forgetting things and moving forward. So I think that in the long run, we will be more efficient in our schooling, in our working. We'll be more efficient in our production. We'll be more efficient in developing vaccines. We'll be more careful about our social contact and how we transmit diseases. Those are all good things down the road. But in the short run, there's no way of sugarcoating this. We're all going to have to pay the price through a lot of sacrifice, mostly economically.
Certainly, human beings do have a way of just forgetting about things and moving on, and there is a price, a heavy price that we're all going to have to pay. Now, one of those prices is the unemployment rate that is said to spike across Africa given the COVID-19 pandemic. Some reports are saying that we could see up to 20 million jobs across the continent going straight to the dustbin because of COVID-19. How do you react to this, and what solutions do you think we need to start providing? Because this has to be one of our greatest issues.
Unemployment has been our greatest issue for the last 10 years, and we just didn't pay attention to it because we're living in a bubble, in a dream. I think we're going to have to deal with it. And the best way to deal with unemployment is to grow your economy through, like I say, investment, education, and infrastructure. So in the medium term, after we get through this difficult period, we need to start looking at education, infrastructure, and ways to finance our own local businesses. Otherwise, when the young people grow up and they have no jobs and no hopes, our security will be at risk as well. So those are more medium to long-term problems. And I think that, again, the government has an opportunity to take a step back and start doing things properly to address what's really important, and not the fanfare of government, not the spending of money, not the being a big man and all that stuff. We need to cut all those things off and start focusing on the real investments for the future.
Well, I mean, I heard you earlier, you said that you support the idea of the easing of restrictions with effect from May 4. But some other people have also raised concerns about some of the steps to be taken from May 4 going forward. One, interstate travel will be banned. And some people say, well, if you still allow public transportation within the states, won't there still be the challenge of community transmission? Questions have also been raised about the stimulus packages that have been provided, particularly by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Some people say, well, conditional cash transfer has been more effective in the northern part of the country, whereas the south, like Oyo State, for example, getting infested rice as palliative. Do you agree that there are gaps in what the various governments, federal and state, have been doing so far? And what should they do about those gaps? What would you like to see? What's your assessment?
Well, I don't want perfect to be the enemy of good. I think that the idea of lifting restrictions is good. Are all the steps in lifting restrictions the best? No. The curfew makes no sense. I mean, having a curfew from 8 to 6 p.m., I don't think that the COVID disease is more active in the night than it is in the daytime. So I don't understand the point of the curfew. So that doesn't make any sense to me. You have a point about interstate travel. Interstate travel, I think the best we should do is at the borders, have somebody checking temperatures like we do at the borders at the airport. We can do that easily. So yes, there are some steps that don't make too much sense, but I think the whole idea of easing restrictions so people can at least earn a living, I support. In terms of the palliatives, and I said this in a tweet, if we're looking at the critically poor, they are more critically poor in the northern part of the country than in the southern part of the country. So if we are giving palliatives to the critically poor, it's going to be skewed towards the north. We don't have to be political about everything. That's where the most people are in terms of population, and most people are in terms of poverty. If we wanted to give $1 million to every Nigerian today, we will give more to the north than we give to the south. So the people that are focusing on the fact that there's been more money sent to the north than to the south, I think they're missing the point. Now, as for bad rice, there shouldn't be bad rice anywhere, and I think that is obviously bad government. But the fact that there's more palliatives given to the north is what you would expect, and I think it's normal, and I don't think we should be political about that.
Mr. Chike-Obi, let's also speak about more changes that we're going to see going ahead with the new normal that we're speaking of. One particular change, of course, that we know is the change in the way people do business. Offices are going to change, office spaces, etc. And we're going to have to digitize a lot of business. How do you foresee Nigeria going forward? Do you see us developing that culture, or do you see us switching back to the culture that we had before COVID-19, whereby we were very happy to always go into offices, we were very happy to have face-to-face interactions, etc.?
It depends on how potent the COVID-19 ends up being in Nigeria. Those things are expensive. So even though they are desirable, they're expensive. If COVID-19, as I'm saying, is not very potent, we will forget about COVID-19 in 6 months and we'll go back to our old ways. Nigerians like to socialize. We like to see each other's faces. We like to press the flesh, as it were. So I think that unless it's very potent and it ravages Nigeria, again, we pray not. We pray that we have this mystical immunity that we seem to have so far. But if it stays the way it is, and at the end of the day, we've lost 1,000 people over a year, I think we'll gradually drift back to the way we were, because it's very expensive to digitize the economy. And that money could be used for better things at this point.
Well, thank you very much, Mustapha Chike-Obi, for joining us this morning on The Morning Show. Always a delight to have you on The Morning Show.
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being kind to me and not rubbing it in.